Hi, this is Jim Ave, and in this presentation, I'm going to discuss our next section in the professional portfolio assignment for our class. So I have the template, the professional portfolio template, on the screen in front of you. So should have that in front of you also. Hopefully your first week wasn't too arduous for you and you made it through okay. And this week, in week 2, we got quite a bit due for week 2. We have another rough draft as I'm going over in this presentation. You also have your first progress report assignment due, which also includes the courage and calling reflection. So that's all in one document. The progress report and courage and calling reflection will be in one document, one file. And then you also have the courage and calling form. Again, it's the same thing as what you turned in, but you're going to post that in a form with an additional 1 to 2 open-ended questions that you want your fellow athletic trainers to answer. All right. This is just a quick overview of week 2 for our class. And last week you completed a rough draft with the introduction and the executive summary for BOC Code of Professional Responsibilities number 1 and the POC Practice Standard number 1. Okay, so I'm going to be giving you feedback as quick as I possibly can. Just so you know, I'm going to show you how I give you feedback. So if you had something that I want you to make changes on, I insert a comment and I'll type something in there, blah, 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 blah. And so then you should be able to see my comments in your paper. You may have to switch. I'm going to pull this. Oh, you can't see it. You may have to switch the view to what's called print layout, and that's how you should be able to see any kind of comments in my papers. So I'm going to get rid of that comment. Ignore, I know. Ignore. All right, so that's one way I'll give you remarks or feedback. I also may type something in red. Oh yeah, forgot. Red. Oops, back that up. Red in your paper. So that's where I can add things in red. That's where you should be able to see changes that I've made or make comments like I showed earlier. That's how I'll give you feedback within your papers, and that's true in all my classes, not just in this class and just for this assignment. That's how I do it in all my classes. I'll provide feedback there. And in some of the other classes where I have actual rubrics, I'll highlight your score in rubric and then actually give you a number for that score. But I try to use the rubrics and provide enough detail so you can see what you got on that particular assignment. Okay. So again, for the first week in this class, you wrote your introduction and your executive summaries. I'll give you feedback. And in this week, you're going to the first thing you should do is hopefully you have a good understanding what I'm just going to use the word code and standard from now on. So hopefully you have a good understanding of the assigned code and standard, number 1 for both. And so what you want to do is find an artifact for the code. Again, in the codes, they have multiple subpoints. Again, you don't have to explain each subpoint, but what's the code about as a whole? And then so you need to find an artifact, a tangible evidence that you are actually satisfying that code at your workplace as an athletic trainer. So if we look at the syllabi in our code is patient responsibility. How can you demonstrate to me that you are actually satisfying patient responsibility? It has to be some kind of tangible object. It can be a picture. It can be some kind of document. Like one of the later codes is is like rehab or something like that. So you can take a picture, you can have your rehab protocol. But for patient responsibility, what is an artifact is where I'm using the terminology that demonstrates you satisfying or mastering that particular code. Okay, so that's one thing you have to find. You're going to find that artifact, just one again. You're going to put that in an appendix, and I'll explain that in a second. Then in this section, in the actual written part of your paper, in your portfolio, what you want to do is explain to me how that standard satisfies the BOC Code of Professional Responsibilities. So pretend I don't know anything about that particular artifact, and I may not. So you can do some summary of the artifact, maybe a paragraph, but the majority of the time in this section should be explaining how that artifact demonstrates your mastery of that code. So this section is supposed to be 2 to 3 pages in length. So you should have 1.5 or so pages explaining how the artifact for the code satisfies the code. Then 1.5 to 2 pages explaining how the artifact that you found for practice standard 1 satisfies that particular practice standard. So again, there's about 2 to 3 pages in length. 1 to 1.5 pages per code or standard for this section. Now, this is the part of the assignment that the athletic trainers don't struggle with it as much as our coaches, because we have a coaching or we have a PE version of this class, and for whatever the reason, the coaches really struggle with this section. So I want to make sure that we work together clarifying this again. Fine. So you have 2 total artifacts. Both one should demonstrate your satisfaction for BOC code number 1. One artifact should demonstrate your mastery for practice standard 1. In the paper itself, you're briefly explaining what the artifact is, but spending the majority of your time explaining why that artifact, that piece of evidence, that thing that you've turned in, demonstrates your mastery of the code and practice. And the artifact can be a picture, it can be injury report, it can be rehab protocols, it can be a letter from a doctor, it can be a letter from a patient, it could be multiple different things. And if you're not too sure, ask. You can post those questions in the Q&A forum, because more than likely other students will have the same question. Okay, so in the, hopefully this doesn't make you nauseous doing that. You want to place your artifact not in the body of your paper, but in the appendices. So Appendix A will be your Code 1 artifact, and Appendix B will be your artifact for Standard 1. And while I'm thinking of that, when you write up this section here, make sure you tell the reader where that artifact is. So you can write in here the artifact, whatever you're going to call it, parentheses. You can do it. The artifact, whatever it's titled, is located, that demonstrates my mastery, and BOC Code of Professional Responsibilities 1 is located in Appendix A. Do that, or you can put it in parentheses like I have here and just put Appendix A. And same thing for your next artifact. You should always tell the reader where your artifact or the things that are in your appendices are located. Last thing I'm going to say is what you're going to turn in addition to your artifact sections and the actual artifacts, is you're going to return in your material from your draft, your first draft. So you should turn in the title page, the table of contents, so this will be updated. You'll include the artifacts information and the appendice and the reference page information. Your introduction, if I ask you to make any changes in your introduction, you should make those changes. Your executive summaries, if I've asked you to make any changes in your executive summaries, you should also make those changes. In the artifacts section, your reference page and the appendices, which include your artifacts. That's what you'll turn in for this draft. If you have any questions throughout this whole process, make sure you post them in the Q&A forum. Do them earlier in the week, because I can't guarantee that I'll check our class site on Saturdays or Sundays.